To understand Champa, forget the modern map. In the year 100 CE, the land we now call Vietnam did not exist as a single country. The north was a Chinese province called Jaya-Aji, ruled from what is now Hanoi under the Han Dynasty. The south, the long, hot, hurricane-battered coast that curves toward the Mekong, belonged to a completely different world. That world faced the sea. It faced India. And in the 2nd century, Indian merchants, priests, and Sanskrit-speaking scholars were already arriving on those beaches, bringing with them Shiva, Vishnu, the Ramayana, and a written script based on Brahmi. In the year 192 CE, according to Chinese court records preserved in the Book of the Later Han, a local official named Ku Liern led a rebellion against the collapsing Han authorities in the district of Xianglin near modern-day Hue. He killed the Chinese magistrate. He declared himself king, and he named his new kingdom Linyi. Chinese chroniclers were furious. They did not yet understand that they had just watched the birth of a civilization that would outlast their entire dynasty. Linyi became Champa, and here is what nobody tells you: the people who built it were not ethnically Vietnamese. They were Austronesian, related by language and blood to the seafarers of Borneo, the Philippines, and Polynesia. They had sailed north up the Southeast Asian coast centuries earlier and settled on the fertile deltas of central Vietnam. When you strip away the labels, Champa was the northernmost outpost of the great Pacific voyaging world, flying a Hindu flag. We will get to the massacre of 1471 in a moment, and that is where this story gets counterintuitive, because the people who destroyed Champa were not foreign invaders, they were neighbors. By the 4th century, Champa was no longer a rebellious district. It was an empire of city-states knit together by trade, marriage, and a shared devotion to a single god, Shiva. Around the year 380 CE, a king named Badravarman I did something that would define the next 1,000 years. In a narrow, mist-covered valley surrounded by mountains near modern Dai Xian, he founded a sanctuary. He dedicated it to Shiva, fused Shiva's name with his own to create a divine identity called Badrisvara, and ordered the construction of a wooden temple to house the god. That valley became my son, and over the next 900 years, 21 generations of Kam kings would add to it. The wooden temple was replaced with brick. Brick was joined by sandstone. Towers rose 40, 50, 60 feet into the jungle canopy. By the 10th century, my son held more than 70 temples in a single sacred complex, a Hindu Angkor centuries before Angkor Wat was even conceived. If this is landing, save this video. You will want to come back to this one, because what you are about to hear about Kam engineering has never made it into a Western textbook. Kam temple builders did something no other civilization in Asia figured out. They constructed massive brick towers with no visible mortar between the bricks. The joints are so tight you cannot slip a razor blade between them. Modern analyses by French, Polish, and Vietnamese conservators, starting with Henry Parmenter's 1904 survey and continuing into experiments at the Warsaw Polytechnic in the 2000s, have identified traces of plant resin, likely from the local D-1EA7 rye tree, fused into the brick surfaces. The theory is that Kam masons stacked raw bricks first, then fired the entire tower as a single kiln, bonding it into one solid ceramic mass. It is a technique nobody else in the world used, and it is a technique nobody has ever fully replicated. Restorations attempted in the 1980s using standard mortar have already begun to crumble, while the original towers, 1,400 years old, still stand. Meanwhile, Champa grew rich. Its ports at Hoi and in Sa Hain became critical stops on the maritime Silk Road. Kam ships carried eaglewood, ivory, gold, and spices to Guangzhou, Java, and Baghdad. Arab geographers of the 9th century wrote of a kingdom they called Sanf, famous for its perfumed wood so valuable it was traded ounce for ounce with silver. In 875 CE, King Indravarman II built a new capital called Indrapura and founded a Buddhist monastery at Dong Duong that would become the largest of its kind anywhere in Southeast Asia, a rival to the great Viharas of India itself. For a moment in the 9th century, Champa was one of the wealthiest maritime kingdoms in the world, and then the north began to move. In 939 CE, after 1,000 years under Chinese rule, the Vietnamese people of the Red River Delta finally won their independence. They founded a state called D-1EA1 IVI-1EC7T, and D-1EA1 IVI-1EC7T was Hungary. The Vietnamese called their expansion Nam Thine, the march to the south. For the next 500 years, it moved down the coast in slow, grinding waves. Every generation, the border between D-1EA1 IVI-1EC7T and Champa shifted a few miles further south. Every generation, Kam cities fell, were rebuilt, and fell again. The Kam fought back. In 1177, a Kam fleet sailed up the Mekong, sacked the Khmer capital of Angkor itself, and killed the king. It was one of the greatest reversals in Southeast Asian history, an empire supposedly in decline, briefly humbling the mightiest kingdom on the mainland. King Jaya Indravarman IV had shown the world Champa was not finished, but the Vietnamese kept coming. The final catastrophe came in the year 1471. The Emperor of D-stroke letter 1EA1 IV I letter 1EC7T, Ler Thon Tong, decided to end the Kam question forever. He assembled, according to the D-stroke letter 1EA1 IV I letter 1EC7T S letter 1EED Kai Tan Thu, the official Vietnamese chronicle, an army of 250,000 soldiers. He marched them south to the great Kam capital of Vijaya near modern Quy Nhon. The siege was short. The chronicle records the number with cold precision. 60,000 Kam were killed. 30,000 were taken captive, including the King Tratan, who died in captivity on the road north. The royal library was burned, the temples were stripped, and in one afternoon the political heart of a 1,300-year-old civilization stopped beating. But here is the part that historians still argue about. Ler Thon Tong did not just conquer Champa. He tried to unmake it. He ordered the Kam language suppressed in official records. He replaced Kam place names with Vietnamese ones. Kam temples were left to the jungle. Kam inscriptions, some of the oldest Sanskrit texts anywhere in Southeast Asia, older than Angkor, older than Borobudur, were allowed to be swallowed by vines. The empire was not just defeated, it was administratively deleted. The last rump state of Champa clung on in the far south for another 361 years, shrinking with each generation, until in 1832 Emperor Min M letter 1EA1NG of the NGUY letter 1EC5N dynasty formally annexed it and abolished it. No treaty, no ceremony, just a line in an imperial gazette, and then came the second erasure. When French archaeologists finally reached my son in 1898, they found what looked like a lost city out of a fever dream. Henry Parmenter spent years cataloging 71 distinct monuments, mapping inscriptions and photographing towers still half buried in vines. He assigned every structure a letter, Group A, Group B, all the way to Group N. Group A1 was the crown jewel, the tallest surviving Kam tower, 24 meters high, containing a masterpiece of Shavite sculpture. Then came August 1969. At the height of the Vietnam War, American B-52 bombers, believing Viet Cong forces were sheltering in the ruins, dropped bombs directly onto the My Son Valley. When the smoke cleared, Group A was gone. Group A1, the tallest tower, the one everyone had called the pinnacle of Kam architecture, the one Parmenter had photographed for the world, was reduced to a heap of scattered bricks. Craters 10 meters wide pockmarked the sacred ground. 20 of the 71 monuments were destroyed in a single afternoon. Today, only about 20 temples still stand at My Son. UNESCO declared the site a World Heritage location in 1999. Restoration teams from India, Italy, and Poland have been quietly working there for 2 decades, still puzzling over how to reglue bricks that were never glued in the first place. And the Kam people themselves, they did not vanish. Roughly 170,000 ethnic Kam still live in Vietnam and Cambodia today. Some are Muslim, having converted centuries ago through Malay trade routes. Some still practice a unique branch of Hinduism found nowhere else on earth. They speak a language directly descended from the Sanskrit-inflected tongue their kings spoke in the 4th century. They are the living remnant of an empire the maps forgot. Why does this matter now? Because Champa is a case study in how history gets written. Not by facts, by whoever is left holding the pen. A 1,000-year Hindu maritime empire, bigger than most European kingdoms of its era, was written out of the story of Asia because the state that replaced it wanted its coast to have always been Vietnamese. And it very nearly worked. CTA 1213 Min. If you are still with me, you already know the algorithm buries stories like this. Subscribe and hit the bell icon, new hidden history every day. Drop a comment. Had you ever heard the name Champa before this video? I want to see how deep the erasure actually went. Outro 1315 Min. Here is the piece of evidence that has never been explained. In 2018, conservators cleaning a sandstone linga at My Son found a Sanskrit inscription referring to a Kam king, a name that appears on no other stele, in no Chinese chronicle, in no Vietnamese record. A ruler who by every official account never existed. The full text of the inscription has still not been translated. What else did those temples witness that we do not yet know the words for? Champa teaches us something uncomfortable, that the past is not a fixed thing. It is a fight, and the losers do not just lose their kingdoms. They lose the right to be remembered as having been there at all. Every civilization that ever fell believed it was permanent. Every one of them was wrong. The question is not whether a culture will be forgotten. The question is who gets to decide. If this hit, My video on the hidden Khmer megacity that vanished for 700 years will make even more sense now, because you will start seeing the same pattern everywhere. For over 1,000 years, the Champa kingdom ruled the coast of central Vietnam, a Hindu maritime empire that traded with Baghdad, sacked Angkor, and built brick temples using a technique modern engineers still cannot replicate. Then, in a single afternoon in 1471, 60,000 Khmer were killed, and the empire was administratively erased from history. This is the story of the lost sanctuary of my son, the mysterious mortarless towers that survived 1,400 years, and the second erasure that came when American bombers destroyed the tallest tower in 1969. Why has almost no one outside Vietnam ever heard the name Champa? And what does its deletion tell us about how history really gets written? Subscribe and hit the bell for new hidden history every day. Timestamps: 0000, the impossible brick 00. 30, why this empire vanished. A kingdom born in rebellion 03. 00, the rise of my son 06. 00, the 1471 massacre 09. 00, bombed twice. How Champa disappeared 12. 00, the lesson history tries to hide 13. 30, the inscription no one can translate, ancient history, lost empire, Champa, Vietnam, hidden history.